I used to go to play to the public park in northern New Jersey and play tennis, which was, if I really want to tell you what I wanted to be a Wimbledon tennis champion. Okay, that was my first goal. I used to go down this public park, and I noticed that when I was about 10 or 11 years old, there was a young man named Barry who used to show up at park all the time, and he would hang out all day. And Barry had some sort of Down syndrome or some sort of mental incapacity that made him odd and difficult. And I just remember watching other kids be mean to him and just really feeling somehow deep inside that that was wrong and that he deserved to be treated as well as anybody else just because he was a person. That's how I see being a doctor, is that everybody's made in the image of God. And it doesn't matter whether they're homeless or have a home, or whether they have money or they don't, or they're insured or they're not. They deserve to be treated like they're an image of God. And so it really actually had a lot to do with understanding who I was as a person when I was a little kid. By the time I finished college, I had pretty much come to the end of myself and was looking over the edge, and it was a pretty deep abyss. And so that became a journey point for me when I decided I needed to either find meaning and purpose or check out. So I just started reading in Matthew, on the Revelation, and by the grace of God, by the time I got to Galatians, I decided I was going to be a follower of Jesus. And so I then decided that I wanted to be a doctor with meaning and purpose behind it. And I was reading my Bible quite regularly, and one of the first things that I really grasped, that God has cast his lot with the little ones. And so for me, that became an important part of my initial call as a physician, that I was going to commit to the least, the lost, and the left out. A Christian writer of the 20th century said something like he would read with the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. You've probably heard that. Well, for me, it's like I have the Bible in one hand and I have my patient files in the other hand. And I'm trying to understand what my patients are going through and how that reflects, and often my hypotheses about people are wrong. I mean, when you go in to see a patient and you come away saying, why, God, has this person been through so much and they can't seem to get a break? That tests your hypothesis about who God is and how the world is. Everything we do, we should be testing our understanding of God and let God enlarge our thinking. I don't think there's any deeper way of holding on to the unempirical preciousness of each person better than we get by understanding the image of God as we get in Scripture. You have to practice seeing people as made in the image of God. Sometimes you can read things and say, oh, that's just a doctrinal statement, or it's just a belief. Yeah, it is, unless you put it into practice. And something like the image of God is a theological concept, but it is meaningless unless you put it into practice. One of the patients that challenged me one day was a man named Tommy, and I had never met him before. He had come in and he'd been on the streets for quite a few days because he had been on a meth binge. And so he hadn't slept, he hadn't showered, he was in a lot of fights. And he walked in pretty much just angry and hostile and dirty and smelly and saying, help me. Sometimes that's the place to start with someone that you just have so much trouble saying, where do I begin? Recuperating the image of God for myself, seeing this person. And so he had these sore hands, and so we said, let's take care of your hands. In the meantime, I left the room to learn a little bit more about Tommy. I was looking at his old chart. And I was also challenging myself because I was arguing with myself about why I would feel so angry with Tommy for treating himself that way and marring the image so much. And then in the time that I was gone, I had a chance to find out that Tommy had a long history, and what he was doing to himself was really almost a repeat of what had been done to him when he was a child. So he had lost that image for himself, and so that sort of made me understand maybe why he no longer had the image in the way he lived. And so when I came back in, I had a different perspective. But he also looked different because after his wounds were treated and he felt like we cared, he seemed like maybe he had a little more hope. And that's what I think we have to always understand, is what can we do for that person in front of us to help them reclaim a little bit of hope. And sometimes it just starts with bandaging wounds, and that's what we did that day.